Hi, welcome to Mr. Dyer's Musings. I'm Mr. Dyer, and today we're going to be taking a look at sheath knives. Stay with me. As always, I'd like to thank my wife and family for their unconditional support. I'd like to thank you guys for taking the time of watching this channel and viewing it and liking it and sharing it with others. And maybe some of you will subscribe, or some of you have subscribed. I appreciate all of you who have supported me so far. This being a month of thankfulness, getting up to 500 subscribers was something that I didn't fathom when I opened this channel. When I opened this channel, at first it was just, to keep in touch with my students and maybe reach out to others who may like history and may like artifacts like I do. But it's growing, and I got some goals for this channel, and those of you who have been along for the ride, thank you. I don't know how to thoroughly express my gratitude sufficiently. I do appreciate all of you. I really do. There's next week is Thanksgiving, or I guess when this shows it'll be on Sunday, so maybe technically this week is Thanksgiving week, and I want to do something special for my 3 patrons on Patreon. Now, I haven't had a lot of success with my Patreon account, and that's fine. But I've had 3 individuals who supported me pretty much from the beginning. And thanks to them, I was able to put away some money to do some trips, and I got a trip planned next year that's going to take us out a ways, and that's what that money is going to be used for. So I really appreciate them. And to show my gratitude, to call them out, Emma, Joe, Dorothy, I'm a woodworker. I have too many hobbies, I really do, but I'm a woodworker. And I was trying to think of something that I could give my patrons who's supporting me this whole time and made so much of this channel possible. And I'm giving them handmade mallets that I made. And you can use a mallet for a lot of different things, but especially for outdoors, in the wood shop, or maybe you want to hit something and not damage it, like a wooden item. So I've handmade 3 mallets, and they're going to go out to my patrons on Patreon as a way of saying thank you to them. I really appreciate giving your treasure to this opportunity, this cause. It means a lot to me. It really does. So thanks all of you. And after watching this video, if you like it, please subscribe. Help this channel grow. Share it with others. I have a ton of videos about Civil War and historical campcraft, things like that. And I got so many more ideas that's on its way. I just wish I had time to make more videos and pump them out a little bit faster. So today's going to be about sheath knives. And I've been on this tangent of talking specifically about Boy Scout equipment, because early Boy Scout equipment in the early 1900s, it was quality equipment, and it really suited the needs of those who were exploring the outdoors. So that's kind of been my guidebook and my primary sources for what was carried out in the field and what was most useful, what was most practical for what was out in the field. Because early scouts, that's what they did. They went hiking, they went camping, they started fires, learned first aid and all that. So it just seemed to me like a solid model of building up my impression for campcraft and bushcraft and things like that. Now, normally I talk about manufacturers, and I talk about the history of those items. For the sake of today's video, because we're trying to wrap up everything that was carried on a scout's belt, That was an idea one of you guys gave me. Trying to wrap up that idea. Instead of going deep into the history, instead I'm going to talk in general terms about what makes a good campcraft or outdoor knife, historically speaking. Okay? Not taking into consideration the trends of modern bushcrafting or modern campcrafting, okay? Historically speaking, what made a good and practical campcraft knife? Now, I've got 4 examples in front of me, and there's a lot of similarities between all of them, but there's also varying degrees of differences. A lot of that has to do with what the intended use of the knives were and construction techniques, historically speaking. The first knife I'm going to discuss is this knife here. This is a trade knife, and this one, because I do want to shout out the manufacturers, because I'm very proud of all the knives that I own, because they're quality. This is a River Traders trade knife, and it has a maple handle. It has brass rivets on the handle to keep it in. It's full tang, which means that it's one piece of steel that goes all the way down and through the handle. You can see the steel on the back side, on the front side, on the bottom side, everywhere. Okay, so this was one really strong piece of steel. Now, trade knives were, they were used in the 1600s, 1700s, especially in the 1700s with fur traders to trade with Native Americans. And that's how they got its name, the trade knives, because you could carry a ton of knives and they didn't weigh a whole lot, and Native Americans would trade with the Europeans for furs or anything else, because Europeans mastered steel production. Okay, Native Americans hadn't mastered steel production yet, so it was extremely valuable to them. Now, this trade knife is about 1/16 thick of steel. It's not a very, very thick piece of steel. It's very, as you can see, it's a straight back and it's got your point. This is a really nice knife for slicing. Okay, the blade is perfect for slicing, and due to its rounded belly here, it's also could be used pretty well for skinning. And if you need to, you can do some woodcraft work with it. But the thin blade makes it more susceptible to damage, like bending or possibly even breaking. So there's your trade knife. It's very basic, but it did all the tasks that your average person would need. You would carry a hatchet or a tomahawk to do your heavier woodworking. This just needed to cut meat, needed to flesh meat, may need to make some tools, and it's strong enough for all those tasks. So trade knives. And I made the sheath, and I like my sheaths to be kind of hanging almost at a 45 for reach around instead of straight up and down like this one here. Okay, so there's a modern reproduction of a trade knife. The next one I'm going to show, hard to say, which one do I want to do? I think I'm going to go with this one. So a lot of people who are starting in campcraft or bushcrafting, you can get really caught up in getting equipment, and it can get expensive super quick. But there's alternatives, and there's lots of good quality cheap knives that'll get you by in campcraft and bushcrafting. But this one I found at an antique store a long time ago, and it's an Old Hickory. Now, the Old Hickory is just slightly thicker than the trade knife. It's longer. Horace Kephart said that the ideal campcraft knife was no longer than 5 inches, and that would do really all that you would need it to do. Now, this is much longer than 5 inches. This is a butcher knife. So the belly of it is specifically designed to cut meat, slice meat, and it has a point that you could pierce it, but the point not as severe as the trade knife. So this is more of a stabbing blade. This one is more of a cutting down like so. So when you're trying to pick out your knife, take that into consideration. Now, Old Hickory was made by Ontario Knife Co. and it started being produced in the 1920s. I think it was 1924 is when the Old Hickory line came out. And they're still cheap. They're still really affordable. They're high carbon steel, which means that you can use it for striking a flint or a ferrocerium rod. It's just a really nice all-around knife. The next one went to this 1950s, or goes to this 1950s plum hatchet. This is a scout set that I showed in my video last week. It has a leather washer handle. It has a nickel pommel. It has a finger guard, so your finger's not going to slip. But it has open on the back, so you can brace the back with your thumb. This is much, well, not much thicker, but it's thicker than the other two knives. It has a piercing point. It has a false cutting back here, and it's straight and it sweeps down. Now this is an ideal hunting knife. It really is, because you can pierce it, the flesh, to cut. Because of this back is angled, but it's not sharp, it's really awesome to break through cartilage. The rounded belly is great for fleshing and slicing off meat. And the blade is about 5 inches long. Now where the nickel pommel is, in my hands, it stops right at the pinky. Now some scout knives, their handle was a little bit shorter. This one is one of the longer ones. And this one's made by Western. Western is a fantastic brand knife. I don't think it gets enough credit as it really should, but I love Western blade knives. The one that you see me use in my videos is this one here. This is my go-to knife. This is very sentimental to me. This was my mother's Western knife, and this one was probably from around the 1960s. And it's the same exact style as the Scout knife. The blade isn't as narrow on the back on mine compared to the Scout knife. It has a wood handle instead of the leather washers, but the length of it fits my hand perfectly, and it has all the same features. So when picking out a knife, you need to decide, what are you really going to use it for? What do you want it to use it for? If you're just going to use it cutting meat and doing wood projects, whittling and cutting wood tools, then a 4 to 5 inch knife, sheath knife, is all you need. You don't need anything longer. Okay? The thickness of the blade, if you're going to baton it, you want thicker. I don't really baton my knives, so that's not something I ever worry about. And if I really needed to baton this, I could. I would suggest that you have a full tang knife, though, which is, you know, having a rat tail knife where it could possibly break off or snap off, especially if it gets cold and you don't really pay attention to what you're doing, that's no good. So having a full tang knife is really, really nice. Having a guard for your finger so your hand doesn't slip, again, especially if it gets cold like it does here in Ohio, I would suggest that. Even this one is made so that the blade juts out just a little bit to prevent your fingers from going up. This one, on the other hand, does not. So you have to really be careful, especially if you're going to stab. This isn't a stabbing knife, this is a cutting knife. But if you are going to use any force, then you have to really be careful about this one. I like wood handles over the leather washer handles. The leather washer handles, as long as you condition them and you take care of them, they'll be fine. But leather will absorb moisture and it can dry out. Wood is very easy to clean. A lot easier to clean than a leather washer handle. Carbon steel. So I shave with a straight razor during the summer months, and I have a serious appreciation for carbon steel versus stainless steel and other steels that knives are manufactured out of. The harder the steel, the more difficult it is to maintain. And a good carbon steel bladed knife, it's easy to maintain, especially when you need to. If you get a nick in a carbon steel blade, it's so much easier, it's so much faster to get that nick out so you can move on with your life than a harder steel knife. So carbon steel is a necessity for me, especially for like flint and steel, ferrocerium rod, and maintenance. Now scouts, in many troops in the areas, they're not allowed to carry sheath knives. My troop, and it's up to the council, it's up to the troop, but in my troop, once the scout earns their first class, then I permit them to carry a sheath knife. To me, a sheath knife is safer, as long as you know how to use it, than an unlockable pocket knife. Okay, with a pocket knife that doesn't lock, then you can close it, and accidents happen. The pocket knife, if you misuse it, it can break on a folder. So having a fixed blade knife where you don't have those issues, I think is valuable. But you have to teach the scouts on how to respect a knife properly. And they can't be flinging it around and playing with it like a sword or something like that. But most of my task at camp really comes down to a sheath knife. I prefer a sheath knife, bar none, over anything else. My pocket knife, I reserve it really when I don't have another knife on me. So it's a good backup. I keep my pocket knife razor sharp just in case I need to cut something more precisely. Whittling, carving, a pocket knife is much handier. But for your camp tools, sheath knife. That's my suggestion. Each to their own though. So I could go on, and I think I got ideas in my head of all types of videos on uses for these different types of knives, and making different things out of them to help you maybe guide your decision on what the limitations are, and what they're really good at, what they excel at. That's future down the road. I want to keep this focused really on why it's important to have a sheath knife in campcraft and in the outdoors, why scouts were permitted to keep sheath knives, and if you're a collector, you could have probably an entire YouTube channel on just pocket knives and scout sheath knives, because that really is part of the trinity of scouting. Cutting tools, fire, and first aid. When people think about a scout, that's what you think about, which makes sense. When you're going outdoors, you're going to use your edge tools, you're going to use a fire to cook and stay warm, and you need first aid in case something happens between the other two. All right? So if you have any questions, please leave them below. If you got a story, if you've got a favorite sheath knife that you like, because I know there's oh my gosh, there's whole discussions, there's whole arguments about what makes a good sheath knife, and really, in my opinion, it's whatever suits you, whatever gets the job done. If you have a butter knife in your kitchen and you can sharpen it and take it out to the field and it does its job, then that's all that matters, really, ultimately. But there's certainly better things than others. There's certain pros and cons. But if you have a favorite, let me know below. If you got a funny story, especially a scouting story or a campcraft story involving sheath knives, please leave them below. I appreciate you guys again so much. I really am thankful for the opportunity to make these videos for you. I get a lot of joy out of it, especially since me reenacting has really been significantly decreased. This is a good way for me to share my passion for history, share my love for it, share some of what I know, my knowledge, and it pushes me to learn more. And as a teacher, I consider myself an eternal student. You know? So I thank you. I wish all of you a blessed and happy Thanksgiving. Okay, I really wish all of you the very best. Please click like if you liked it. Please consider subscribing. Please share it with others, especially if they're a knife enthusiast. Maybe they have a comment or story to give to me. I'd appreciate it all. Have a wonderful week. Give a kiss and hug to your loved ones, and take care.